Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. Hey guys, I need your opinion on whether or not I'm the a hole in this situation with my parents. So, for some background, my parents set up a trust fund for me when I was born, which I've known about my whole life. They've always said that it's for me to use for my education, my future family, or any emergencies. I've never really needed to dip into it, but recently I've been wanting to start my own business and thought it would be a good opportunity to use some of the money. However, when I asked my parents about it, they told me that they were not comfortable with me using the money right now and that they'll explain later. I've asked them multiple times what they mean by that, but they just keep avoiding the question. First, I tried to talk to my parents and see if there was any way we could come to a compromise. I asked them if there was anything I could do to prove that I was responsible enough to handle the trust fund. But they were stubborn and refused to budge. So after my parents refused to tell me why I couldn't use my trust fund, I decided to take matters into my own hands. That's when I realized that the only way to truly get to the bottom of this was to do some investigating on my own. I hired a private investigator to look into my family's finances and see if there was any hidden information that they weren't telling me. A few weeks later, the investigator came back with some shocking news. It turns out that my parents had been using my trust fund to pay off their debts and other expenses. They had been lying to me all along, and I was furious. I planned a family dinner and invited my parents, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins. I wanted everyone to be there so there would be no secrets. During the dinner, I asked my parents again why I couldn't access my trust fund. They still refused to tell me. So I stood up and announced that I wouldn't be sitting back and accepting their decision without an explanation. That's when I pulled out a piece of paper and said that I had done some digging and discovered that the reason I couldn't use my trust fund was that my parents had been using it to pay off their debts. They had been taking money from my fund for years without my knowledge or permission. Everyone was shocked, and my parents tried to deny it at first, but I had the proof right in front of me. My grandparents were furious, and my aunt and uncle couldn't believe what they were hearing. My cousins just sat there with their mouths open. My parents looked embarrassed, which I honestly even enjoyed a bit. They had been lying to me my whole life about my trust fund. All these years, I had believed that it was some sort of technical issue or a lack of trust in me that was preventing me from accessing it. But no, it was because they had used the money for their gain. I was so angry and hurt. But I tried to keep my composure. I asked them how they could do this to me and why they never told me the truth. My mom started crying, and my dad looked down at his feet, unable to meet my gaze. They didn't really have an answer for me. They just kept saying they were sorry and that they didn't mean for it to happen, but that wasn't good enough for me. I had to know why they did it. After some more questioning, they finally broke down and told me the truth. Apparently, they had been struggling financially for years, and they saw my trust fund as a way to get out of their situation. They promised themselves that they would pay it back, but things never quite worked out that way. I was heartbroken, but I also felt a sense of relief that the truth was finally out in the open. The whole time, while my parents were telling me about the secrets they had been hiding away from me, the rest of the family was just watching in shock. My parents were always known to be responsible with their money, so I don't think anybody expected this from them. Now, however, I have to figure out what to do next. I know I can't just let this go. They have stolen from me, and I need to take some action. But what should I do? Should I talk to them again to see if they are willing to pay me back eventually? Or is there a way I can take legal action? Or maybe I should just let it go and forget about the trust fund. After all, it was my parents who put the money in there for me. Update 1. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's been a hot minute since I posted about my parents stealing from my trust fund. So I wanted to give you all an update on what's been going on. After that explosive family dinner where I exposed my parents for the liars and thieves they are, things were pretty tense for a while. I mean, I knew my parents were withholding the funds from me, but I never thought they would resort to stealing from their child. Anyway, I had to decide what to do next. At first, I was just so angry that I wanted to take legal action right away. But after talking to some friends and family members, I realized that it might be better to try to work things out with my parents first. So I sat down with them and we had a long emotional conversation. They apologized again and again and promised to do everything in their power to pay me back. It wasn't an easy conversation, but we all left feeling like we had made some progress. Of course, I'm still hurt and angry about what happened, but I'm trying to forgive them and move on. I mean, they are still my parents at the end of the day, and I don't want to ruin our relationship over money. So we've come up with a plan for them to pay me back over time, and I'm starting to feel like we might be able to put this whole mess behind us eventually. It's going to take a while, but I'm willing to be patient and give them a chance to make things right. Update 2. So my curiosity got me into a messed up situation, or a weird one at least. I have been asking my parents to give me more details on their financial situation and why exactly they're struggling so much. I wanted to find out why they were in debt, but they refused to go into detail. But then my grandparents, who had been there at the dinner where I revealed my parents' lies, came to me telling me there was something else my parents were hiding from me, something bigger than the trust fund. They wouldn't tell me what it was because they said my parents should be the ones to tell me. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. But the more I thought about it, the more curious I became. So I decided to do a little investigating of my own. I started digging around, asking questions, and trying to uncover any secrets that my parents might be hiding. And boy, did I find something. It turns out that my parents have been keeping a massive secret from me my entire life. They have been hiding a sibling from me. Yes, you read that right. I have a sibling that I never even knew existed. It's a long story, but apparently my parents had a child before I was born, and they gave him up for adoption. They never told me about him, and they never tried to find him or reconnect with him. But then recently there must have been something that came up that caused them to reconnect with their son and access my trust fund money to pay for it. I was completely stunned when I found out. It felt like a punch to the gut. I still can't believe that my parents have been keeping this from me all my life. I'm not sure what to do next. I'm still trying to process everything, and I haven't spoken to my parents since I found out. I'm not sure if I'm ready to confront them about this yet, but I know that I can't keep this secret bottled up inside me forever. Update 3. I was able to find my brother, whom I just found out about, and meet up with him. It was a weird experience for both him and me. He knew about my existence, but he was instructed by my parents to not reach out to me. He's about 10 years older than me, and it felt surreal to know he's my brother. He told me everything about how my parents gave him up for adoption when he was a baby because my mom had him when she was 16. She felt like she couldn't take care of him, so she and my dad gave him to another family that raised him. He has a disability that caused him to need special medical care and attention that the new family was able to give him. His adoptive parents died about a year ago, and he's been in financial trouble since then because he can't foot the medical bills on his own anymore. So he contacted my parents to see if they could help him out since they are still his blood family. And my parents were willing to help, especially since they might have felt guilty for giving him away as a baby. So I put two and two together and realized that they took my trust fund money and spent it on my brother's medical expenses. I confronted them about it as well, and they broke down in tears and explained everything, verifying my theory. The thing is, I'm not mad at them or my brother for using my trust fund money for his medical expenses, but I wish they would have told me about it. We'll have to figure this out as a family now. I do have a job, so I can make my own money to start my business, and I don't expect them to pay me back for the trust fund money. And maybe if my business does take off in the future, I'll be able to help out my brother as well. It's a new motivation I have. Thanks to everyone who kept up with my family drama. This will be the last update now. Thanks, guys. NAH, after reading all of the updates, I'm just glad everything turned out all right. You even won a sibling since getting to know your brother. I understand why you were mad at first, but in the end, your parents did the right thing, except for the lying, of course. But life happens, and they probably didn't know better. YTA. Trust funds are a privilege, not a right. Your parents had valid reasons for not allowing you access to it, and it wasn't your place to force them to reveal their secrets in front of the whole family. It's time to grow up and respect your parents' decisions, especially now that you found out your brother needs the money for medical treatment. Next story. I, 26, female, have some rather religious relatives. Very conservative, don't believe in evolution. You get the idea. They, my aunt and uncle in their 50s, and my cousins, 14 male and 16 female, were visiting me, my parents, and my grandma, who lives with us, for Christmas. To add some backstory, I remember this one visit to my aunt and uncle when I was around 12 years old, when my aunt made a comment on some girls wearing sort of revealing clothes. Something along the lines of, if only they were aware of the thoughts they're causing men to have. I didn't realize how messed up that is back then, but I randomly remembered again a few years ago and have since started wearing short skirts whenever I see them. Nothing obscene, skirts that are totally appropriate for everyday wear, but enough to piss off my aunt. Today was the same. I was again wearing a short checkered skirt with sheer black tights and a rather baggy jumper. Definitely nothing sexy or provocative. I got the usual disapproving glances from my aunt when they arrived at our place, but today things went differently. A few minutes later, while people were getting settled in the living room, my aunt approached me when I was briefly in my room where other people couldn't hear us. She told me that I should change out of my skirt into something more modest since my male cousin was starting to be at that age, and that I shouldn't give him bad thoughts. I told her that I would continue wearing what I'm wearing and went back to the living room. Seems like my aunt then approached my dad in the kitchen to make me change, and they started fighting. To make a long story short, other people became involved. Things were heated and my relatives left shortly after. My dad is fully on my side, especially since, we're not just talking about random men, but my relatives. My mom, however, thinks that while it is not okay to imply that the way women dress is somehow relevant to what thoughts men have about them, I should have just changed to keep the peace and respect my relatives' religious beliefs. I do feel a bit bad that this is how part of our Christmas celebration went, so AITA for refusing to change? NTA, your aunt is sexist as frick. She's the AH by thinking the responsibility over men's thoughts lies on the women. Men need to be taught from an early age to respect body autonomy, and your aunt is failing at teaching him that. He might become an incel when he grows up if he has no proper life lessons about respecting women and not seeing them as objects, which is essentially what your aunt did to you. Next story. My family is a mess. We fall out with each other all the time and communicate terribly. I have tried to improve our communication by dragging a few family members to counseling and giving people books about communication, but nothing has worked. I am currently estranged from my aunt, but I just received a Christmas card from her. She wished me and my fur kids a Merry Christmas. Unfortunately, I had to have one of them put to sleep a few days before Christmas, so it's just one fur kid now. I want to use a red pen, cross out the S in fur kids, and send the card back to her. Every time I look at it, I feel angry. It feels like such a stark example of the fact she doesn't know what's happening in my life and doesn't really care. She's my aunt. She should be in my life. She should know what's happened. On one hand, it feels petty, and I tell myself to be the adult in the situation and let it go. I know doing this would be an example of poor communication. Despite our difficulties, I still try to model good communication in the hope that maybe we can improve things. On the other hand, I'm feral with grief for my lost cat, my grandpa who died this year, an arson attack on my home, the fact I had to have an endometrial ablation, which means I can't have children, and my family doesn't seem to care. 2022 has been a lot, and this just feels like the last straw. I am buckling under the weight of all this. So, WIBTA if I sent my aunt back the corrected card to make the point that she's absent from my life? Edit. Ouch. Well, that seems unanimous, and I accept the judgment. I will just put the card in my filing cabinet with my other cards. Update edit. The mods have told me to update this within the post. Thank you for the advice I received. It was pretty unanimous that I was an a-hole, which I accept. In all honesty, I did struggle a little with how harsh some of the comments were. I ended up speaking to my psychiatrist. Then, as many of you suggested, I rang my aunt. I couldn't put this in my pocket due to its length, but a lot of people seem to have assumed my aunt and I were never close. That's not the case. In fact, I lived with her and my cousin on and off as I grew up, as my mother has never been compliant with taking her medication, mental health issues. I think our previous closeness made the estrangement hurt more. Anyway, I rang her. It wasn't an easy conversation, and I don't know how things will go from here, but we've agreed to speak on the phone once a week and see how we go from there. So thanks again for the kick in the shins. It's resulted in my aunt and I talking, and me not acting like the petty bitch I was contemplating being. I am sorry for your sad medical news and for the loss of your grandpa and cat. This has been a very difficult year for you. Don't return your aunt's Christmas card with corrections. That would be really mean and make YTA. If you want your aunt to be more involved in your life, just pick up the phone and call her. It takes two people to keep a relationship going. It's not solely up to her. Ask yourself what you know about your aunt's life for the past year. How has she celebrated and what has made her sad? The best way to have a friend, OP, is to be a friend. You've had an absolutely shit year, and I am so sorry you have to deal with all of that. It's completely understandable that your emotions are running so hot. But let's take a deep breath and look at this from another angle. The time frame in which you need to look is from the day your baby passed to the postmark on the envelope. It's within the scope of reason that when your aunt wrote the card, your pup was still with us. It's feasible that even if your family knew how to communicate, that the card would say the same thing. You were grieving and looking to lash out. This is so human. But still, YWBTA, don't let this be the hair that clogs the drain. YTA, for all you know, she sent her cards before your pet passed away. Either way, it's an honest mistake. You're letting your grief color your perception. My condolences on your losses this year. FWIW, if your family doesn't seem to care, it's possible they don't know how much you're hurting. Losing the ability to have children isn't the sort of loss that people understand right away. Losing your grandfather and your pet, that's a grief we all experience. Fertility loss is a different thing, not better or worse, but cloudy. They may not know what that means or what it meant to you. We as a society don't discuss fertility matters publicly, and often we hide those painful experiences because we don't want to make others uncomfortable. Likewise, our loved ones won't know what to say or how to act. Should we bring it up, or will that upset you? Should we act like everything is normal? Nobody knows what to say or do, even if we want to help. That's not your fault either, but if you need to talk, reach out to the people who care about you. Tell them you are hurting and give them space to process with you. If they can't or don't provide what you need, feel free to DM me and we can talk. I haven't experienced what you went through, but I have some experience with similar issues, and I know how difficult it can be to articulate what you're feeling. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.